Welcome to episode 5 of the Hanukkah Erotica podcast. I'm Raizel, and I'm joined today by my co-host Malya. Hi, Mal.
Hey.
And by Felicia Berliner, the author of Shmutz, a novel. Hi, Felicia.
Hi, so excited to be here with you, Malya and Raizel.
We're so happy you're here.
This is awesome.
This is so exciting. So for episodes 1 through 4 of our Hanukkah Erotica book club, we were diving into a new genre we just discovered, Hanukkah romance books. Hanukkah
Rich material.
Rich material. Honestly, Felicia, I'll tell you, we've been reading a lot of Chazarai, for lack of a better word. This is a real pivot. This is a real pivot for us.
Sharp pivot.
We decided Hanukkah's over. We'll pivot to Jewish books. And I have to say, before either of us read the book, the cover of Shmutz had me fooled into thinking that it was of the Jewish romance genre. So we were pivoting to Jewish romance, leaving Hanukkah romance aside. And then 2 weeks ago, I got a text from Malya, and she said, Raizel, I finished the book. It's very good, but we have a little issue. It's very sad and very serious. It's not a romance. And I said, don't worry. I spoke to the author. Felicia Berliner is joining us for the conversation.
And I was I should have known Raizel's 2 steps ahead.
So we both read the book. We loved your book.
Well, thank you.
I read it in
much.
like a day. Yeah.
And, I love the fact that your interest and your podcast is evolving and that you are not staying within the box of a particular genre. I think Raizel, the protagonist of Shmutz, like you, Raizel, and you, Malya, would be really happy to hear that you're getting outside of the categories and the boxes and, seeing what interests you and what you're moved to explore.
Thank you for that. I will also say that Malya and I think I could speak for you, Malya. We both read a lot, and one genre that we've both read a lot of is this, I would say, off the derech memoir. Right?
Absolutely.
We've read a lot of memoirs that Felicia, I suspect you've read also, and we love them.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
There are so many beautiful books. When people ask me about, they say that they want to learn more about Hasidism or, life in a Hasidic community. Shmutz is a novel, and memoirs really give you the flavor and, the experience of the people writing the memoir. So yes, I think I'm glad you've read those, and I encourage people to read those all the time.
You know what? I just realized before we dive into talking about Shmutz with you, can I share your bio and maybe just we'll do a summary of Shmutz for our listeners, and then we'll really dive into talking about Shmutz. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay, great. So Felicia, who now our listeners have already met, lives in New York City. Shmutz is her first novel. She has an MFA from Columbia University, where she was awarded a teaching fellowship and the Henfield Prize, and a BA from Yale University. She grew up in Los Angeles and attended Yeshiva High School. Felicia coaches writers, artists, entrepreneurs, educators, and other change makers. Wow. I'm not surprised, because Felicia, you're an incredible writer. We I think are both pretty quick readers, but there's something about your writing. I found myself savoring the sentences and rereading them over and over. Your writing is so stunning.
Well, yes, I was trying to sneak it all in, in a busy weekend, running after my kids. And then there were points where I was no, I need to sit down and
fully enjoy this instead of just sort of trying to cram it in before the podcast. So totally agree.
I savored your sentences, the way that you describe food, smells, the fluorescent lights of the university. I mean, just the way that you describe everything is so palpable and rich. I smelled the foods, I tasted the food. I just loved your writing so much. Truly, I really savored it like I was eating the bacon, egg, and cheese that she was eating, and I've never had one. I actually do want to share that part of the book at some point in this conversation, but I guess a summary of Shmutz. We gave a brief summary in our last episode for our listeners who are joining our book club, but Shmutz is about a Hasidic girl, Raizel, who lives in a very sheltered Hasidic family, with a Hasidic family in Brooklyn, and she goes to college to become an accountant, and because of that gets access to a laptop that she otherwise wouldn't have access to. And with access to her laptop, she gets exposed to the world of the interschmutz, which is the world of online porn. And as she is becoming more integrated into her world outside of her home in college, she's also exploring this world of porn where she, I would say, becomes addicted to porn. And on the
considers herself addicted to porn, I guess.
Right.
That's what she describes it as in the book.
Right. And then really all of the fallout that happens in this time of her life. It's really a coming of age book more than anything else. And it's stunning. It takes place in a year and a half of her life. And we just really adored it. I think that one thing that's so fascinating is how you kind of juxtapose this, probably one of the most rule-based worlds, types of lifestyles that is just filled with rules and is so inhibited, with the most uninhibited of worlds. These two worlds are combined, and she's, I think, at war with the two.
Yeah, she's definitely in a dilemma. I mean, first, let me just say thank you for reading Shmutz, which I love saying to people, right? And, you know, I'm really grateful for you and your listeners, you know, people who want to go on this journey with Raizel, right? I mean, she loves her family. She feels deeply connected to God and her family, her community. So when she discovers pornography online, she finds Shmutz and starts learning about sex. She's really thrown into this terrible conflict. And, you know, you describe her upbringing, her family life as very rules-based, which absolutely yes. And I think that comes through in the book. And you've described the internet world as not having rules. I actually think that over time, Raizel comes to perceive that there are certain norms and conventions of pornography too. I think maybe initially she's so shocked that she doesn't perceive those, but I think over time she does see those. Of course, they're completely different sets of rules and expectations, but it's not. You know, I wouldn't say that her experience over time in the book is that, you know, there are no rules online.
That's true.
Yeah.
And you're right, she does learn. And because the way that she sees the world is through the rules of how to interact and the way that men interact with women. And I think you're right, that kind of is the lens that she's looking at it through. I remember, you're right, the way she describes those scenes, which are very vivid. You're right, she does kind of point out what the norms are. Doesn't she notice what's happening behind her? Those kinds of things.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, what's great is putting this young woman who's been so sheltered, right, who doesn't even have language for sex or for body parts, not in her Yiddish Mamalushin, not in English, not in porn slang, right? Like she's learning all of it via the internet. so she is discovering and exploring, all of this. And that's how she actually comes to have a different understanding of some of the rules that she has been living with, as well as seeing, what's out there, right? She's a curious, smart young woman. So she wants to know.
Right, she does. Malya, I'm curious. This is a question for you. Did you learn any new Yiddish words while reading Shmutz?
Yeah. I
All did.
many new Yiddish words that I never knew I would learn or existed, frankly.
Shmundi was new.
Shmundi was a new one for me, for
Yeah,
sure.
Me too.
Yeah, well, she's learning on the internet, right? So basically, anything that that she could find on the internet would be fair game to put in the book.
That makes sense. And was that a part of your research process? I was curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I could, imagine Raizel, this very bright young woman, exploring online and seeing, which internet rabbit holes would she go down and what would she be looking for and finding. So, that was a great way to expand her Yiddish vocabulary and mine at the same time.
Yes. Really, it was.
But the idea that she would want to sort of reverse translate everything is so, I don't know, brilliant. First of all, I wondered if it was intentionally, if there's something comedic about it a bit. I mean, also sad, I guess. It's sad, but also funny at the same time, because it's like all these words being used in this way. There's something sort of silly about it. It's almost like, a parody of like your Yiddish grandmother who's speaking so differently using these types of words in this language. But also it's so sad because it just shows like her frame of reference is so absolute that she can't even use, like she has to learn these words and then translate these words into Yiddish to even have something that she can conceive of.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, she is in multiple languages, right? She's operating in multiple languages. There's the English of her college classes. She does speak English, right? She did learn English growing up in her home and in her community, but not college English, right? That's still a new experience for her. And internet porn slang, that's something else. Yiddish, many people have said to me, Shmutz is funny, right? The word Shmutz and the Yiddish in Shmutz is funny. And that, I think, gives the book like some of its richness and texture, that even things that are dark or upsetting for Raizel, things that she's seeing that are shocking to her, can also be absorbable or digestible through the lens of this language, which is also funny and in some way comforting, or at least more familiar.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Yiddish is so rich, and really all Yiddish is a mix of languages. And certainly for Raizel, she's mixing up, all these languages, plus making up her own words, right? She has Raizlish. That's her own language.
And I was wondering, for example, Seichel phone. I laughed out loud from Seichel phone. Was that Raizlish, or are there people are there Yiddish speakers that call smartphones Seichel phones? That one made me laugh out loud, but I wasn't sure if that was a Raizel or if that was Yiddish. English, well, I don't know.
I'll claim it for Raizel.
It's so good. It cracked me up.
One.
Seichel phone cracked me up, and Shmutz bride cracked me up. So much there. It's true. I think that there's something about it, the comfort, but it does provide levity almost.
Yeah. Well, good. I hope you had a few good laughs reading Shmutz.
It is really, I just think amazing. a few components, and all of it. I loved all of it, but her relationship to these goth students that she meets in college. She goes to school. I envisioned it as like a CUNY school in the city.
Totally.
It's a fictional college, but
No, I went to Queens College and there were those goths like at the lunch table.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't know how if you.
No, I'm at Hunter. I was at Hunter for graduate school for sure.
They
So
were there.
I was picturing, because the way that the dining hall was described in Cohen College in the school was just so spot on. So Felicia, like I just truly, and I guess Molly's experience was the same in
Totally.
Queens.
Mhm.
So and between when she goes to the way that's described the dining hall, and there's like a table of goth students, and Raizel, this Hasidic girl, she's kind of attracted to this group of other outsiders, I think is kind of the way that she puts it, the way she describes them.
Yeah, very much. Mhm.
And I just that connection, that component to the book, I thought was really interesting. There's a section where she first meets them and they start devouring a thermos of her cholent. Can I read it? I just really loved it.
You're going to make us all hungry.
But it's true. But that's the thing. The way that you write about food is so incredible. It's impossible not to feel hungry after you hear about like plump barley, the way you described it.
Yes, I really wanted the mom was cooking something in some scene and she like smelled it and I was like, oh, I really want that. It was like stuffed cabbage or something.
Yes,
yeah.
The stuffed cabbage, the way that you describe the smells, the foods with everything is just so gorgeous. So this is one of her goth friends. Sam hoists a large worn satchel onto the table. The bag is covered in metal chains and has a large silver cross at the latch, and Raizel instinctively recoils. Sam doesn't notice this, digging intently through the bag, but not finding out what she needs. Damn, I'm hungry, Sam says. Raizel unpacks her lunch and offers Sam her spoon. What is this anyway? Sam points at the thermos. Cholent, Raizel says. Turns out Goita Goths love cholent. Jew chili, Spark says. Look at those potatoes. It's Irish Jew stew, says Kurt. Sam keeps going with Raizel's stainless steel spoon from home. The others find plastic and fork in. What kind of sausage is this? Asks Kurt. Raizel doesn't know about sausage, only Mama's kishka, flour and fat, pepper and paprika. They eat bite after bite of the tender, falling apart flanken meat, the beans and barley plump and shining after cooking so long with the marrow bones, the golden potatoes dense with the flavors of onion and garlic and more paprika. It's just so...
That's a really good cholent.
So good. It's a great cholent.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to Raizel's for Shabbos. Right?
Yeah,
I would love to.
I
want some. Yeah, that cocoa cake sounded good too.
Right.
Mhm.
And just the way that she describes these friends, black liner circles her eyes, but there's still a soft brown, the hunger showing in them as she eats Raizel's food. Like I get it's the way that you describe her friends. It's so clear that their connections to their family are different and not as strong as Raizel's to her family. They're hungry in a different way. Like this, I think physical hunger. And they both connect. So yeah, tell us more about, I guess, choosing that group of goth friends. I'm so curious about it.
Yeah, well, I think your description of them as the other outsiders was really spot on. Raizel notices them. I mean, there are not all that many women wearing like long black skirts, and the superficial similarity just points out the way that looking only at the way somebody's dressed and making an assumption based on that is so false, right? Because of course, Raizel wearing a long dark skirt and one of her Goita Goth friends wearing a long dark skirt, does not mean the same thing at all, right? But she notices them. There's this kind of visual or graphic similarity, and then the deeper similarity that they both really don't fit in some way. And her capacity to connect to them, and it's really more opportunity also for humor, because there is culture clash, right? There are two cultures that don't know each other, that have assumptions and ignorance, and yet they can find some common ground and learn about each other. And yeah, I mean, I think it's funny and in some ways sad, but also has the potential for both groups to learn about each other and get past the binaries, right? And I guess I would say that the journey of this book is for Raizel to get past the binaries as many ways and places as she can. So, is it possible to be a Hasidic young woman and a college student? Raizel says yes. Is it possible for a Hasidic young woman to be friends with goth kids? Raizel says yes, right? Like all of those typical binaries or boxes that she would find herself in, she finds ways out of. And, that is a big joy of Shmutz.
Yes, and there's more. I think it's amazing how much you pack in to this book, because there's also these interesting relationships with her siblings. I think that weave in more layers. There's a storyline, and I don't know how much we could talk about and give away of her different siblings. I don't want everyone to read the book.
Don't give away the ending.
I won't.
No.
But
Absolutely not.
Her siblings. One is like almost a schnorrer. I don't know another way to describe him.
Yeah.
One is a little bit of a misfit pothead with a broken engagement. We know these types. I know these guys walking around Brooklyn.
More and more.
Her brother Yossi loves putting on dresses. Really, I mean, she has a real awareness of Yossi. I don't know if that's because she's been exposed to so much schmutz, or if she just in her gut was already someone who would have kind of been aware of Yossi and him being different than the rest of his family, but not necessarily fitting into the box. But she knows that he's a little bit out of the box.
Yeah, well, he is already identified as not fulfilling some of the norms and expectations of the family, right? Her father is down on him, was putting it diplomatically, right? I mean, her father is very aggressive towards him and unhappy with him about not fulfilling the expectations. So, yeah, I think, Raizel is certainly sensitive, and her curiosity and her exploration online is giving her more context so that when she sees difference, she's computing, right? She's thinking about, well, how does this fit into this other source of knowledge that I have? And what kind of sense can I make of this? What kind of language do I have for this, even if it's not what I grew up with in my home? So yeah, she has more ways to contextualize and understand what she's seeing.
Right. Even in addition to all the different dynamics with the siblings, which weaves in more and more layers of richness, there's this very, very short but very rich scene where Raizel gets put in a group project in class.
Yes,
I love this scene. It's not long, but it's so powerful. She gets put in a group project with a Asian boy and a Black boy, I think Jason and Brian. And the Black student offers her a bite of a Hershey bar. I envisioned a Hershey bar. And there's a whole thing going on in her head about, could she eat it? And she ends up taking a bite. She doesn't want to insult him. And he then says something like, oh, I didn't think you were going to take a bite. Jews are racist. And she says something amazing, racist. And then she thinks, I know that word. I've heard it in school and it's in the handbook. I can get kicked out for doing this. and he says something like anti-Black. And she all of a sudden has these flashbacks to a few memories of her mom clutching a purse when she walked by a Black family at the zoo, and she says something like, yeah, racist, and he just this amazing and then she says, can I be can I be Brian, pro Brian? I'm really butchering your gorgeous writing, Felicia. I'm so sorry, but it's the same binary. It's like, can he not be anti-Jew and still friends with Raizel? And can I be friends with Brian and still racist or something like that? It's just, she's just learning all these things for the first time and figuring it out. And
her instinct is not to be defensive. It's so interesting because she's so identified with her community, but she's also, her instinct is not to be defensive. She's very sort of like, yeah, you're right. Like, once she understands, which I just thought was interesting. She's like, I don't know, she's almost being an anthropologist about her own community as well as this new setting that she's found herself in.
right.
The book has so many opportunities for her to learn and be exposed to things that, she didn't grow up with, or, new ideas, new terms. So, that was another opportunity for her to learn and grow and take in somebody else's perception. So yeah, I'm so glad that you resonated with that scene.
It really did. It just, in the midst of all of her learning and what's happening in her life and her work in therapy, which we haven't even touched on, though it's such a big part of the book. It's like amazing to me that she develops these new friendships. She has this, all these experiences in school, and then this beautiful conversation, really fascinating conversation with this student. I found the beautiful language that I butchered, but it's also when she admits it, and she says, yeah, Raizel admits she wishes she could say it's not true, but it seems that Brian might be right, at least about her family. The realization sets fire to her cheeks, flaming red up to her forehead and through her scalp. It's as embarrassing as admitting that she loves him, to say this thing that is the opposite of love. Truth, he says, his chin going forward. And then moving on, she says, Jews are anti-Black, and she is a Jew. So is she anti-Black, but not anti-Brian? Could Brian be anti-Jew and not anti-Raizel? It's just really, I really thought that was a very powerful scene. So, yeah.
I think she's experiencing what it means to confront a stereotype, right? And to both appreciate what dimension of Brian's experience might have led him to say that, right? And what aspects of her own experience kind of give some maybe credibility or plausibility to what he's saying, but also knowing that they're just two people, right? They're human to human. They're having a very real interaction, student to student. And that is one of the amazing things, or can be one of the amazing things about university, right? Like that you do encounter people who are different from yourself and have to look at your own expectations and assumptions. So, the book gives Raizel, over the course of the book, Raizel has so many opportunities to look at the assumptions or expectations that she's going into something with, and, be confronted with surprises.
Mm-hmm. It's true. What do you want people to take away from this book?
To some degree, I feel like we've been talking about that the whole way, right? Raizel is a devout young woman, and she's also a sexual human being. And the book is about her struggle, and what she discovers is that she can't be just one thing, right? She can't live her life like, I'm only going to be this one thing, that even if that's what everybody expects, there's more to me than that. She does not want to be put in a box. I think a lot of readers have really related to Raizel's desire to be a full human being and not give up pieces of herself. So I would say the message is be whole, be all of yourself.
Yeah, I think that there's a part of it that kind of speaks to also a woman's right, or everyone's right to pleasure, to knowing the names of their body parts, to experiencing all that life has to offer.
I think that also it seemed to me like, and I'm glad that Raizel began by bringing up sort of the contrast between this book and like the OTD memoir genre that we're familiar with. But I feel like for me, and I couldn't help but comparing them to this book as I was reading it, there's always a villain, I feel like, in a lot of those books, like in the memoirs, you know, like the father's the villain, or the Rebbe's the villain, or the teacher's the villain. I felt like this book had no villains. Everybody seemed to be in their own little way. You sort of revealed how they also couldn't be just one thing, and maybe not in as dramatic a way as she was struggling with it, because it was her eyes we were seeing things through. But you sort of saw how everyone, like even the people who really had accepted the traditional Hasidic roles in their own ways, one way or the other, were also kind of, there were repercussions to the things that they were tamping down, but they were also finding ways to express them. So I really appreciated that. Like your character, your ability to create so many three-dimensional characters and to let us see how the same struggle was sort of playing out with everyone.
Well, thank you for, being such a dedicated and close reader. I really appreciate that. I don't see any of the characters, even the ones with deep flaws, as a villain, right? And it's just like the way that you are describing it, the characters are multidimensional. I love the fact that this is the Hanukkah erotica book club podcast, because most people don't put Hanukkah erotica together. You did, right? So you're already past the binary yourselves. And, I am glad that you're reading these characters also past the binary of, villain and hero, right? That the characters are fully human, fully dimensional, with their joys, their strengths, and their flaws.
They feel so real to me. I'm just, all I want is, I would love a sequel. I want to know what Raizel's up to.
Totally.
So
Oh
badly.
my God.
And they feel so real to me. I was really so invested in her story, and I would love to hear where she is now and what. Yeah, I could really use more Raizel.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. A few readers have said that. So we'll see.
We'll see. Are you working on anything?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely working on other things, more will be revealed. Yes.
Great. I really look forward to reading more from you. I truly adored this book and your writing, and I really look forward to more. I have one funny story to tell you. I was out on Friday night at like a shul event for work, and I was talking to a couple, and one of them is a voracious reader, and I told her about your book, and her husband, he went to day school, and he said, Shmutz. I said, that's a bad word. And I said, well, I know that's what the book is about. And so his wife goes, well, what's Shmutz? I thought it means dirt. And at the same time, we say two different words. And I hear him go, it means semen. And I said, no, that's spritz. Which is another new one for me.
It's a good, healthy debate.
Yeah.
It was very funny.
I think if you consider semen to be dirt, then calling it schmutz makes sense, right?
Exactly.
So I'm sure that
you're right.
Has been used to refer to anything that people were seeing as dirt or dirty. So
You're right.
Yeah.
Well,
good. I'm glad you brought a little schmutz to Friday night shul. And
I was telling my boss at work about this book club, and I was told her that we were reading this book, and she said, let me look it up. And she's like, whoa, that cover. I'm ordering it now.
It's an incredible cover. I know you must get this all the time, but it will go down in history. It's an amazing, amazing cover. It really is.
No, I think the designer did an incredible job. Her name is Leiwan Kwan, and she definitely did research and, she found a way graphically to express the way that Raizel's Jewish identity and her sexual identity are so intertwined, right? So the cover of the book is really telling you right away, this is about, you know, a woman who is deeply Jewish and is deeply connected to her sexuality. So there it is, right on the cover.
It's brilliant. It really is.
Yeah.
I wanted to also ask you, I went to once again, going back to the OTT memoir comparisons, but I once went to Shulam Dean, who wrote All Who Go Do Not Return. I was once in a book club reading his book, and we had a conversation with him as the author. And he said something very interesting, which I was thinking about as I was reading this book, which was that he felt like the reason that people decided to stay or not stay in the ultra-Orthodox community really had nothing to do with how much they believed or didn't believe in any of the tenets of the faith and or even God or any of it, and everything to do with how happy they were in their marriage and in their family. And if they happened to have sort of stumbled upon a happy enough marriage, then they would stay, even if they didn't actually believe any of it. Whereas even if they really believed most of it, if they were super unhappy in their family, they were the ones who were more seriously considering leaving. And I think, he put himself in the latter category. But I guess I was thinking about how I felt like Raizel, even though she's rebelling in so many ways, but she doesn't really seem like she's questioning much of the philosophical underpinnings of any of it. She doesn't question, like, does God see me? Does God want these things? What does God expect from me? All those things are sort of not even touched. It's much more about, like, but what about me and what I want? And so I guess I just wondered if
Well, I loved, I think Shulam Dean's memoir is beautiful. I really do. That's certainly one of the ones I mention to people. And I think for Raizel, the dilemma is that she does feel connected to God and is in an I-thou relationship with God, right? She prays, she feels that is part of her life. And her dilemma is, well, how does that mesh with my sexuality, my curiosity, my pleasure, right? So, I think that if she were dismissive of God, that she wouldn't have this dilemma, right? In some ways it would be, there wouldn't be a story here, but she does have the dilemma. So what is she going to do? How is she going to reconcile her faith, her love of her family, and her sense of herself in the world? So, that's really the book, is that dilemma. How is she going to reconcile or move forward with these things that seem irreconcilable?
I love, there's a scene where she's trying to figure out the timing of when she should say the Shema. I guess she wakes up and she figures that if she fell asleep, she didn't say the Shema before a night of porn, and she needs to figure out, do I say it before? If I say it before, is it negated by the porn? So the God is a part of everything for her, even in those her nights of porn. And I love that. So
yeah, that was one of those funny moments where that idea that, that there are, you mentioned at the beginning that she's in this very rules-based society, rules-based family. So of course there are rules about when do you say Shema, and that's a perfect example of what it's like to try to reconcile her curiosity, her sense of herself, and this sense of being connected to God and operating within the framework of her religious upbringing.
Totally. Well, to our listeners who have not yet read Shmutz, go out and read it.
Get on it.
It's just, you will, and I think, for those of you who have, I'm sure you adored this conversation. And for those of you who haven't, read it and then come back and listen one more time, because I just love talking to you tonight. And I can't wait to reread the book. So thank you so much for being here.
Truly.
Well, thank you. You are a pair of dream readers, whatever your just wishes for. And it's been great talking to you. And I'm excited for more of your listeners to have fun reading Shmutz.
Us too. Thank you so much and have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Wow, Mal.
Amazing.
I am so happy she joined us.
That was amazing. Wow. I loved it.
Me too. Me too. So truly, listeners, if you haven't read this book yet, it's so good. I love talking to her about it. I can't wait to even re-listen to our conversation just now.
I mean, granted, this is a pivot for us.
This is a pivot for us.
This ain't no YA Hanukkah, Nantucket tale.
But you know what? Like us, I think our listeners contain multitudes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We're not romance Hanukkah erotica readers by day.
We're beyond the binary, like Felicia said.
We are. And the thing, this is a pivot for us as podcasters doing a Hanukkah erotica book club. But this isn't a pivot for us as Malya and Rachel, two readers who would have read this book.
Good point.
And also would have assumed the other one read it.
Oh,
We
totally.
could have listed 10 off the Derech memoirs just now, and well, I know you've read. We haven't even talked about all of them,
Of course.
So that that's why this isn't that much of a pivot for us, just as readers in general. But I do think it kind of gives us opportunities for this podcast to expand to other Jewish books. Not just, obviously our focus is going to be Jewish romance, from here on out, and back to Hanukkah romance for next Hanukkah, but I think that this gives us an opportunity to explore other books, and I'm glad that I was fooled by the Hamantashen cover.
Totally. I think, anything that's
The Hamantashen
spicy is fair
schmunzy.
game. Listen, we've long discussed also the Hamantashen as
Yes.
a,
Of
erotic
course.
symbol.
Of course.
That hides in plain sight.
Of
So,
course.
right.
So that was incredible, and I can't wait to do our next book. So should we tell our listeners what our next book is so they can read up?
Absolutely.
Okay, next book is called Hot Rabbi.
Great title.
A great title by Aviva Blakeman.
It's not
And-
about Rachel's dates in her 20s.
And it is not about all those hot rabbis. It's about another hot rabbi in a small town, and we'll get into it. So give it a read, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. We're releasing 2 a month now, and we're so excited that you're here. Follow us on Instagram at Hanukkah Erotica Book Club, and give us a review. We don't have any reviews yet, but a lot of people are really into our podcast. So if you're a listener and you're enjoying what you're hearing, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it.
Please.
Please do. Sound is by William Levin. Art is by Galdor. I'm Raizel. This is my co-host and stepsister Malya. And we look forward to the next time. Bye, everyone.
Good night.